Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis. Lucy is the nickname given to a partial fossil skeleton discovered in 1974 in the Afar region of Ethiopia by paleoanthropologist Donald Johansen. The bones of Lucy are believed to represent a single individual skeleton. Johansen claimed that Lucy belonged to an extinct population of ape-like creatures that once roamed Africa between 3 to 4 million years ago. The species Lucy is said to represent was named by Johansen as Australopithecus afarensis, meaning southern ape from Afar. To date, over 400 specimens have been attributed to Lucy's kind, afarensis, but nearly all of those consist of isolated bones or bone fragments that were found eroding out of the hillsides, jumbled together with the fossils of all kinds of African species. With only 20% of Lucy's skeleton preserved, it remains one of the most complete afarensis skeletons discovered. However, the bones attributed to Lucy and her kind were found disconnected and broadly scattered across the Afar landscape.
Johansen claims that Lucy is 40% complete. Well, actually, if you count the missing bones of the hands and feet, it's actually only 20% complete, so much of it is missing. Moreover, they had to sift 20 tons of sediment, so they would screen them and get rid of all the loose sediment, and they would wash it by the river, and they would pick out the bones that Johansen said may belong to Lucy's skeleton, and there were hundreds of fragments. So they had to sift not only just 20 tons of sediment, but it was an area of about 50 square meters. So do all those bones belong to Lucy's skeleton? It's an open question. In 2015, an evolutionary scientific journal showed that actually one of the vertebrae bones belongs to baboon. But for 40 years it went unnoticed, and Lucy was reconstructed in museums with that bone as a part of the skeleton all around the world. So do we really know for sure if Lucy's skeleton and the broader kind belong to the same species? Well, I don't think we should trust that, because even today, numerous experts in the field have written extensively in the scientific literature that afarensis appears to be a commixture of ape bones and human bones. It's not a single species, it's not a valid taxon, according to these evolutionary paleoanthropologists.
It is widely acknowledged that the fossils attributed to afarensis display a substantial range of variation in both size and anatomy, leading many paleo experts to question whether all of the remains belong to the same species. In fact, Johansen originally reported in the journal Nature that at least 2 different species from separate genera were represented in his collection of bones. He described some of his fossils as looking virtually identical to modern humans, while other fossils he described as looking distinctly like apes. Later, Johansen decided to reclassify all of his fossils, including the human-looking bones, to a single new species which he named Australopithecus afarensis. The extensive range of variations seen in his fossils were now explained as physical differences between males and females of the same species, called sexual dimorphism. To make the story work, paleoanthropologists have claimed that the larger human-looking bones belonged to males that walked upright like modern humans, whereas the smaller ape-looking bones belonged to females that lived in the trees. However, experts in the field have taken issue with Johansen's sexual dimorphism hypothesis and have cited evidence that his original interpretation was more accurate, that afarensis is a jumble of ape and human bones.
There's 2 basic camps. There's the arborealists and the terrestrialists. The arborealists tend to emphasize the bones that have been called Lucy's kind that looked very apish. Now the terrestrialists, like Johansen, they'll emphasize the isolated bones that look more human. For example, they found a 4th metatarsal bone, and this was published in journals in 2011. And they say, see, this isolated foot bone looks human. Therefore, it proves our model, that Lucy's kind actually walked upright like modern humans, and therefore it supports the displays we see in museums and in textbooks around the world. To make sense of it, they say, well, maybe the larger bones that look more human-like belong to males, and the males walked habitually upright like modern humans, and the smaller ape-looking bones belong to females. And so these females were more like apes and lived among the trees. We've never seen a sexual dimorphism where the males locomote fundamentally different than the females. So how do we make sense of this? Well, there's a third competing view, that actually Lucy's kind is a mixture of ape bones and human bones. Therefore, it's not a valid taxon. It's not a real species. And this has actually been promoted by numerous experts in the field, including famous paleo expert Richard Leakey and his mother, Mary Leakey. In fact, even in the journal Human Evolution, Schmidt and Hausler, leading experts in the field, said just that. Afarensis, Lucy's kind, is a jumble of multiple species, not our ancestors.